Welcome back. You're watching To The Point. A document leaked by Edward Snowden to the Washington Post suggests that the United States National Security Agency could have spied on the Indian government as well as the Bharatiya Janata Party. It's front page news in India, but how significant is the story? How should we react to it? And what response can we expect from Washington? My guests are India's former ambassador to America, Meera Shankar, and the foreign affairs editor of the Hindustan Times, Pramit Pal Chaudhary. But first, the spokesperson of the External Affairs Ministry, Syed Akbaruddin. Mr. Akbaruddin, how does the government react to reports in Monday's Washington Post that it's possible the United States National Security Agency could have spied on the Indian government as well as the BJP?
Well, Karan, first of all, thank you for providing me this opportunity to communicate through you to your viewers. Like many in the rest of the world, we did notice reports in the US media regarding authorization given to entities of the US government, ostensibly by a US court, to intrude upon the privacy of communications of the Indian government, its citizens and Indian entities. Now, if such intrusions have indeed been authorized, it is obviously something very disconcerting. And if they have taken place, it certainly is extremely objectionable.
Have you raised this matter with the United States government or the United States Embassy in India? And if you have, what response have you got?
Well, Karan, I mean, this is part of a continuum. During the past year, we have had similar disclosures of surveillance of Indian government entities, and we have raised these once in July last year, again in November last year, and today our concerns have been clearly expressed to senior officials of the US government through their embassy here in New Delhi.
Now, as you say, this has happened at least twice before in the last 6 months or the last year. Did you get satisfactory responses when you raised this matter in July last year and November last year?
Well, I can be candid with you, as we were candid with our American interlocutors today, that despite us raising these for the third time, we did not receive any satisfactory explanations. And this was amongst the points that we made today in our discussion with the American diplomats.
In which case, a quick last question before I let you go. How hopeful are you that this time, the third time, you're going to get a satisfactory response? You never got a satisfactory response the first 2 times. How sure are you things will change this time?
Well, Karan, journalists sometimes think that this is a hopeless end to a story, while diplomats always see endless hope. So we are on different sides on this, and if you choose hope, as Christopher Reeve once said, that everything is possible, and therefore we look forward to a response from the US government on this, and an assurance that should these authorizations have taken place, they will not be acted upon by the US government entities as far as Indian citizens, entities and government is concerned.
All right, Mr. Akbaruddin, on that note of optimism, even if some may consider it somewhat unjustified, thank you very much for joining us. Meera Shankar, how serious and worrying are these reports? Or would you say spying is the sort of routine thing countries do, and India is probably doing much the same, not just in America, but to a lot of other countries as well?
Well, I think spying is a part of the game. What is new, however, is what I would call the technocratic super state, which enables the kind of mass surveillance and massive surveillance which has caused concern around the world.
What you mean is America has a greater capacity because it's a technocratic super state which India doesn't have?
Well, I think if you look at their own, at the reports which have come out, and they've been coming out since last year, since the Snowden papers began to be published in The Guardian and in the Washington Post and so on, 193 nations were the target of US surveillance.
And other entities.
And other entities, including the UN, IMF, ADB, and so on. And certain foreign leaders also had their phones tapped.
But stick to India. Are you saying that in fact we should worry because America is better able and perhaps therefore more effective in spying than we are? Is that a cause for concern, or should we just worry because we've been spied upon?
No, I think that it is a matter of concern. It's a violation of your laws.
Just as we violate their laws when we spy on them.
We don't acknowledge that.
Well, obviously not, and they don't acknowledge it either. But you know we do it, and we know we do it.
It's a violation of our laws.
Yeah, but that's not. Let's leave that aside. We all know it's a violation of laws. The point I'm saying is this.
Let me say it's unacceptable, and
just as our spying on them is unacceptable, which is why, how serious is this? Given we all spy,
the US has to provide us some degree of reassurance, and I think the important lesson that we have to take from this, and which is a lesson which countries like Germany and Brazil are also taking, that you have to enhance cyber security.
Okay. I'll come to the lessons in a moment. Let me stop you there. I'll come to the lessons in a moment time. I want to stick, first of all, in narrow focus on this. The Washington Post points out that the document that they've published reveals, as Mr. Shankar said, that 193 foreign governments and entities combined have been spied upon. But the important thing is, clearance for this was given by the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. We don't actually know after authorization was given whether the spying happened. It's quite possible that no spying happened. All that was done was paper clearance was given. Is that not therefore a critical fact we in India should keep in mind when we respond to this development?
Well, yes, we have all that Snowden has mentioned is authorization. He doesn't seem to have any knowledge of whether or not actual surveillance took place as a consequence of the authorization. Now, if you read books on the NSA, NSA is authorized to spy constantly on all sorts of organizations, but it is always a political decision or an operational decision to actually carry out the spying. That Snowden doesn't seem to have any idea about.
And there's something further. The same document released by the Washington Post also reveals that the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court actually only gave authorization for 1 year. That was 2010. Thereafter, in 2011, fresh authorization would have been needed. So just as we aren't sure whether anyone acted on that authorization, we also aren't sure whether authorization was received for subsequent years.
We don't,
well,
but I don't think it matters. But yeah, I fully agree. I don't think we know, but it doesn't matter. I would assume that they would be spying, because let's keep in mind what the NSA does, the metadata structuring that they have, is to collect data endlessly from all of the various electronics and just store it. At some point later, they can recall that data. I should add, India does metadata analysis as well. I've received briefings from the government about our capacity for metadata. We do this in India. When you buy a railway ticket in India, when you make a telephone call, when you buy a an airplane ticket, it goes into a metadata bank in Hyderabad.
So there's an element here of the pot calling the kettle black when we complain about what the Americans are doing.
Well, Karan, may I mention that the reports which have come out since the last year in terms of the Snowden papers say that India was the 5th most targeted country for purposes of US surveillance.
It may well be true, and I'm not denying it. All I'm saying to you is, given that we spy to the extent we are capable of spying, and I'm underlining that, so does America. America's capacity is greater than ours. But what I'm saying is, are we morally in any better position than them? When we all spy on each other, the point I'm making is, how serious an issue is it?
Well, I think even US allies have taken it seriously, including Germany and including Brazil. And they have, sought reassurance from the US government. And the US government has been looking at ways to mollify public opinion there.
What about
without necessarily full satisfaction?
Your view is a different one.
My view is that both the Brazilian and when I talk to Brazilian officials and German officials, they understand that the Americans will change nothing. But they have to make noises to keep Angela Merkel or Rousseff happy. But Americans have told them, look, it's not going to change. German intelligence has known this. German intelligence, as German press has pointed out, actually was a partner to the spying. And they see they don't expect the Americans to change one knot. The only real issue is, can they match the Americans, which is what the Brazilians now hope to do.
Why do you think the Bharatiya Janata Party was spied upon? In 2010, it was an opposition party. There was no clarity that it was going to come to power anytime soon. Mr. Modi hadn't become the phenomenon that he became in 2013. Why then would the BJP have been spied on? Or do you think it's explicable because this is only one of 6 political parties. The others include the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. It also includes the PPP across the border in Pakistan. So is it explicable or is it a bit perplexing?
It's perplexing. I mean, I would think it's perplexing. And certainly it's also part of the surveillance which was done vis-a-vis the government of India in terms of these reports. So it's not limited to a political party, it also covered the government of India.
The view that Mr. Shankar gives, and it's one that I'm sure the BJP completely agrees with, is that it's perplexing that they were chosen, particularly when they were in opposition. But I noticed from the Washington Post that in fact other organizations like the IMF, the World Bank, the European Union, the International Atomic Energy Agency, all of them were spied upon. Now, in that wider context, if these non-governmental institutions are being spied upon, some of them very close to the Americans in sympathy and ideology, then why is it surprising for the BJP to be spied upon?
Well, it's surprising only in the sense that, one, the BJP, as you mentioned, was not in power. 2010 was not an election year. The BJP, if anything, was not in a particularly good shape at that point. There was nothing major happening on the Indian policy front. So Modi was not even really coming into the campaign picture.
You don't think the Americans can claim that they actually had a better understanding of the future than Indians did, which is why they were spying on the BJP?
No, because the point is that one of the reasons that Nancy Powell had such a problem was that as of even December last year, I know that the embassy here and the State Department didn't believe Modi would do very well.
So there was no real convincing rationale for spying on the BJP?
Well, that we know of, yes. But
other than unhealthy curiosity?
Well, I don't know. There was one of the possibilities was they were concerned about the nuclear liability bill, which was at uppermost in the minds of the Obama administration for a long time. Maybe they suddenly, 2 years after the bill was passed, decided they needed to spy. Zardari visited Ajmer in, I think, April that year. Perhaps they had some interest in Indo-Pakistan relations and what the BJP was opposed or supporting. I mean, you can speculate on it, but it's completely speculative.
A lot of speculative reasons, but no single good overriding reason.
Absolutely.
Mr. Shankar, as someone who's been ambassador in Washington, as someone who's been a very senior diplomat on our side, what do you think will be the response of the US Embassy? You just heard Saeed Akbari tell us a moment ago that the US diplomats were summoned. They were asked, A, to verify the reports, and then B, if the reports turn out to be credible that India was spied upon, to give some explanation. Is there any possibility that in a couple of days US diplomats are going to turn up at South Block and say, well, actually, yes, we do verify it, we have been spying on you?
Unlikely. Unlikely, but I think it's important to convey our sentiments on the issue as well, so that you don't take it lightly. The other, I think, important lesson...
Can I interrupt that? If you say it's important to convey our sentiments so that they don't take it lightly, that assumes that there's a possibility after we've conveyed our sentiments, the Americans won't do it again. Is there any likelihood of that?
Well, they might be more careful. Let's put it like that. There's always hope, as Akbaruddin said, as a diplomat.
But it's not we who caught them out, it's Snowden who leaked.
Yes, it's true that it is Snowden who leaked.
So they have to ensure there are no more Snowdens.
Yes. Yeah, there are also more countries in the world who do it and where there are no Snowdens. I mean, and I think that's the important lesson for India, because our cyber security has to be strengthened, and we have to create digital autonomy or independence, secure systems for governmental communications.
When you say our cyber security has to be strengthened, is that to create firewalls to ensure that we don't get broken into, or is it to give us the capacity the Americans have, which is to break into their system?
Well, I think at the moment when you're talking about cyber security, I would be saying, you know, we should have the capacity to have our own servers, to have our own email systems, to have some of our own hardware. I mean, you've had concerns, let's say, about Chinese companies which provide equipment for some of our telecom companies.
These are clearly things that we should have, but wouldn't you accept that in terms of priorities for the government, they're a long, long way down the road?
Yeah, well, first, I don't think the Indian government is capable of producing something like Gmail. It's not. There are Indian companies that have produced mail services, Rediff Mail and so on, and then none of them are a patch on any American system, which is why nobody in India uses them. And the Indian systems are even worse, the government systems that are produced. Frankly, the concept of whether we can station a server in India versus in America doesn't make the slightest bit of difference. They're all connected. You can break into a server. There's servers in Sweden, for example, which are regularly broken into by the NSA. Besides, though, Sweden is one of the great hubs for this type of thing, and they break into Chinese servers in China. It doesn't make any difference. The real issue is...
So there is no real protection against clever technology?
No, the question is developing technology, and you're correct in one point, which is the Israelis, which is probably our closest international partner on cybersecurity right now. One of the things that they have kept telling the Indian side, the ultimate best means of cybersecurity is cyber offensive capacity, and that India lacks. We don't know how to attack anybody else.
If we can attack them, that would be the best defense.
Absolutely.
Let me widen the discussion briefly. I'm going to move on. I'm going to move on because we're running out of time. Is there a danger that this development, which has attracted so much attention in the media and has probably concerned the media more than it seems to be concerning the government, they're much more measured in their response, but is there a danger that it could cast a shadow over Indo-US relations? Just as John McCain is coming, Kerry is expected at the end of the month, our Prime Minister is going to Washington in September, we're trying very hard to put the relationship back on the rails. Could this be an obstacle?
I would hope not. I think that the relationship needs to be put back on the rails. Yes, it does erode trust. But I think there are larger questions.
But how damagingly does it erode trust?
It depends how the relationship goes. You know, you're making an effort now to put the relationship back on the rails. You've visitors from the US coming here. You know, you have Deputy Secretary William Burns. You have
well, you've got John McCain, the former presidential candidate today.
You have Secretary of State John Kerry, and then leading up to the visit by our Prime Minister to the US. And I think both countries have many more strategic interests at stake.
You know, let me put this to you. One of the things I noticed today was that BJP General Secretary Rajiv Pratap Rudy was extremely mild and measured in the way he talked about this. He actually called it a matter of ethics rather than go any stronger.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And he also said that in fact the MEA would do the official responding, not the BJP. Does that give you a certain assurance that this government is prepared to try and contain whatever potential damage this can cause and not let it get out of hand?
Well, it looks like that, certainly.
And do you think that the Americans will be understanding when they come and say all the right things, regardless of what they continue to do?
Yeah, I mean, they will expect some rhetorical statement, and then they know that it won't matter, and they'll move on. Ultimately, it's important to realize when a country initiates surveillance against another country, it doesn't necessarily mean it considers that country hostile. A lot of America's allies, Israel, France, all spy on the United States and vice versa. It means you think that a country is important to you and your interests. So in many ways, you're actually right. I would actually say if we found out from Snowden that America hadn't bothered to spy us on...
We should be offended.
We should be offended, yeah. Or we should be worried.
In other words, the Modi government can cheer itself up by saying, thank God we're being spied on. Yes. All right, on that note of jocularity, my thanks to both of you for joining me and for putting in perspective this whole little story, which I suspect is a much bigger story in the media than it is in fact a cause of concern for the Modi government itself. Many thanks indeed. And there we end this particular episode. See you tomorrow. Goodbye.